位老师还有各位同学，还有今天的那个讲者艾文老师，大家晚安。原则上呢，我们还是准时开始因为我知道那个艾文老师为了这一场这个导览，其实花了蛮多时间的。那其实这次的展览呢虽然是不是很大，但是所有的展品都是艾德老师特别亲自到这个匈牙利去选回来的，而且同学们注意到，他那个所有的布置都是艾德老师一个人自己做的，对，那个我想说这个图书馆没有做任何的协助只是提供场地。那我们其实非常高兴说有这样的机会。那其实我在听玉洁老师描述其实艾德老师其实很认真而且很积极的，为了这一次的展览呢，跟这个玉洁老师这边有过多次的对话，而且是主动的来跟他讨论说这个展览该怎么做会比较好。那其实我蛮感动的因为这个其实也是在为同学们做示范就是真的要做事怎么对事以真那这一次是也要谢谢那个邵景主任外语中心有这样的这个机会，可以有这样的一个展览到图书馆来这边做。那也是希望我刚刚有稍微问了一下，有些人好像还没有正式去仔细的看过那等一下如果说还没有看过那个展览的，可以听完这个讲座导览之后，再过去看，应该会更有感觉。那我就不多讲我们赶快把时间呢通通交给这个艾德老师。那在开始之前呢，我要代替校长就是赠送这个图书馆自己做的这个节品呢给这个艾德老师。
Yes, good evening. Hello, thank you for coming. And I would also like to thank the people who made this event possible. Ms. Chang, wonderful director of our department. It was her brain from which this idea sprang forth like a spark, and I caught on fire, and here we are. Thank you to the librarians who helped put this together, and thank you most of all for coming. So, Hungary. First thing we're going to do is stand up. Please stand up. We're going to listen to the national anthem of Hungary. If I can play the video. this is a new beginning, because in Hungary every New Year's Eve at midnight they play this on every TV channel. And I think it is a new beginning because, after all, Putai is an international school, and I think events like this are, small steps on the road leading to being a true international school. So let's begin. Oh, by the way, this is just a rough translation of the words of the national anthem, and we can conclude two things from this by looking at the words. Number one, we had a pretty rough history. Number two, we like to have a good time. Right? Where basically this is a prayer asking God to give us a good time. Okay, today I would like you to leave with an image of a nation that is characterized by resilience. If you know history, you know that in Central Europe there were empires that came, empires that went. There were nations that came, nations that went. Languages that came and languages that went. And after more than 1,000 years, we're still here. And that is not a small achievement. I would also like to talk about a nation that has an infinite amount of talent when it comes to being inventive. And I'm not just talking about technological or artistic inventions, but most of all, this is a nation that had to reinvent itself over and over again throughout the centuries. Our official history starts in the year 1000. That's when we become a Christian European nation, but our history goes far back before that. So we went from being pagan to being Christian in Europe. Then maybe some of you have heard about the Austria-Hungary Empire. That was a monarchy. We went from that to being a democracy. During World War II, we were influenced both by the Nazis, Nazi Germany, and later by the Soviets who occupied our country. So that was the communists, and today we're liberal. A liberal nation, living in relative liberty. We were once a ruler of nations, and at times we were ruled by nations. I would also like to leave an impression of a nation that is characterized by diversity. Allow me to read this other quote here. Austria-Hungary was a multinational realm and one of the world's great powers. It was the second largest country in Europe after the Russian Empire and the third most populous after Russia and the German Empire. The empire built up the fourth largest machine building industry of the world after the United States, Germany, and Britain. Now, once the empire fell apart, the people remained. And as you can see, the spectrum is still quite wide. This is supposed to show the minorities still living within the borders of Hungary. We have everything from Germans to Bulgarians, Arabs, even Chinese, even Africans. Finally, I would like to leave with an impression of a nation who has a culture that is really impressive. And it's a culture that sort of acted as leaven to the world. Because as you will see, there's a great outflow of people from this region, and they have done great things all over the world. One of the things that characterizes Hungary is music. A lot of people go and study music there. A lot of people like and appreciate Hungarian music, both folk music and classical music. Hungarian classical music is unique, and it is considered one of the country's most important contributions to the culture of the European continent in general. Hungary has produced some of the most influential classical music composers in history, who enjoyed success and admiration throughout Hungary and throughout the rest of Europe. So let's begin. These are the goals I would like to achieve tonight. Let's see how it goes. I think it's not an easy task to present or represent or introduce a country, because there are so many aspects, so many things one can talk about. When I was thinking about this problem, this question, it sort of dawned on me that we very often think of the world as being divided. We do this for reasons, for several reasons, sometimes for convenience, sometimes out of ignorance. We think of the world as having an eastern part and a western part, and we think that these two parts are very, very different in many, many ways. Obviously, languages are different, attitudes, temperaments are different, the way people relate to each other, these are all different. However, what we often forget is that between the East and the West, there's a space there right in the center. And what's special about this space is that when you're in the center, somehow you belong to both the East and the West, and somehow you do not belong to either. So you have characteristics of both. Over there you can see countries that normally are considered to be Central European. That's Hungary, Austria, and the Czech Republic. That's a very popular tour for tourists who want to get a taste of Central Europe. Now, having said that, we have to realize that being in the middle is not easy. We are like the middle child of the world, because we have big brothers on the left, big brothers on the right, and sometimes we shout to be noticed. We want attention because we know who we are and we know that we have something to offer to the world. But sometimes, as I said, it's difficult because you get lost between your big brothers or sisters. Historically speaking, we were often caught in power struggles. People coming from the left, people coming from the right, all asking to join them, to join their cause. Up here, that was the Austrians, later the Germans, and more recently NATO and the European Union. On the other side, we had the Mongols, we had the Ottoman Empire, we had the Soviet Union, and even religions. They all tried to establish a base in this region. Having so many different influences coming from so many different angles, it's no surprise that the country ended up literally being torn apart. This is what happened in 1920 after the end of World War I, when out of all the countries that participated in the war, it was Hungary that was punished the most severely. And mostly we have the French to thank for that, so thank you, French people. It was their idea to create sort of like a buffer zone between themselves and the Russians. And they wanted to make friends by donating our land to whoever wanted it. So this is the single darkest moment of Hungarian history. Today what remains is the hardcore. Hungary has a very fertile agricultural arable land. We had gold mines, we had the forests from which to get valuable timber. So it's no wonder that all the surrounding countries wanted a piece of this Hungarian pie. However, every cloud has a silver lining, as they say, and in our case, the upside of this situation, of having so many different influences, sort of being like in a whirlpool of people and languages and cultures, the upside of this is that we have so many different influences that play into the culture of this place. As you can see, we have blonde girls, brunettes, redheads, girls with black hair, brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes. You have great variety. It's a great place to be. Diversity. Up here, these two little things are supposed to represent religious diversity, and literally we have everything. Although when we think of Europe, any country in Europe, we like to think that they're all Christians. That's not really the case. We have always had a large Jewish community, we have Buddhists, we have Hindus, we have really everything. Also, historically speaking, I mentioned the Ottoman Empire. The parts of the country that they occupied, and once they left behind their mosques, so you can still see it in the architecture. So that was a very, very brief overview of the history of Hungary. Let's talk about, well, let's look at present-day Hungary. So as you can see, it has shrunk in size, but we are not defeated, we are still here. Now, the country itself has several geographical regions. The largest is a great plain. That means it's flat. It's flat land. Now, taking a train ride across the Great Plains is similar to taking a cruise across the sea or the ocean, because your eyes have nothing to look at. And as you're sitting on the train, very soon you realize that you start having thoughts and ideas, and soon enough you find yourself looking in instead of looking out. It's a very spiritual experience, truth be told. So that's the Great Plain area. Then we have some mountainous regions. Since unfortunately most of our more dominant mountains were taken away, today the highest point in the country is only 1,014 meters. It's not very high. So basically the whole country is quite flat. Of course, this again has its advantages as well. It's very suitable for agricultural kind of work. We have several World Heritage Sites. Some of these are natural, some of them are man-made. Okay, here are a few images. This is an image taken in one of the largest cave systems in the whole of Europe. It's a very extensive cave system that goes on for kilometers and kilometers and kilometers under the ground. In fact, it's so huge that there's a complete a music hall in one of the caves. Complete orchestras can fit in there, plus the audience, and the acoustics is amazing. Okay, to give you an image of the landscape, I could say we have rolling rivers, rolling hills, rolling fields. Everything's just rolling. It's a rock and rolling place. The countryside is very peaceful, very quiet. The largest lake in Central Europe can be found in Hungary. It's called Lake Balaton. In fact, it's so big, we like to call it the Hungarian Sea. There are all kinds of water sports, lots of activities. It's also a very famous wine-producing region. Great wines grow there. And generally speaking, it's just a fantastic place to spend the summer. We have historical towns, and as I mentioned, they can be very, very different in character, depending on by whom and for how long they were occupied, or what kind of people moved in there once the local population was erased from the face of the planet. So, as I said, it's very interesting to travel from one town to another, because they can have a very, very special, very different atmosphere. We have a great hot springs culture. Actually, the largest natural thermal lake in the world is in Hungary. It's basically a hot spring the size of a lake. Right? Castles and fortresses. Fortresses obviously served military purposes, trying to protect the country and the population from invaders. The castles were more for the wealthier people to show off their wealth. But being in a castle like that, being in a fortress that was built in the Middle Ages is really a transformative experience. And you also realize that even though people who built castles, yes, they had most of the wealth and they had most of the power, and it was not exactly an ideal society either, but if you ask yourself, what about our world today? What are we going to leave behind? What are the wealthy people building these days? If you think of a minimalist holiday home in Malibu, I don't know how interesting that's going to be in a few hundred years. These castles, they show that the people who inhabited them, they were highly educated, they cared for culture. They were a very cultured group of people. They appreciated arts, the music, music. Okay, some more images of castles. Now, what remains, because of course 2 world wars, they did their work, and a lot of these castles and fortresses were bombed or destroyed. But what remains, some of them have been turned into hotels, others they function as museums, and some of them are just in a ruinous state. Universities, they also look like castles. Think about Europe, most of the buildings look like castles. That's because they are also very, very old. As you can see it up there, the University of Technology, which is in the capital city, is one of the oldest institutes of technology in the world. Okay. Let's talk about the capital of Hungary, which is Budapest. English speakers like to pronounce it as Budapest, but I do not like the sound of the word pest. There are no pests there. It's Pest. The name is basically made up of 2 words because the city is divided by the river Danube in the middle, and one side is Buda, the other one is Pest. Pest is more like the business side, and Buda is more like where the villas are, the historical part of the town. Okay, so we are going to look at some sites of Budapest. Castle Hill. Well, as the name suggests, it's a castle on a hill. And that's where the kings of Central Europe got together for their meetings and for whatever they did in the past. As you can see, it was first completed in the 13th century, which is quite a long time ago. Now, note the strange sound of the phrase, first completed. I mean, how many times can you complete a building? Well, if it gets destroyed and burned down and bombed to pieces, then you have to finish it again and again and again. So it was renovated many times. Chain Bridge. If you really pay attention to Hollywood movies, you can very often see this appearing in many feature films, especially if the movie has some vampires or spies. Because probably the reason for this is that it's quite old and the atmosphere is just something ominous and old and perhaps a little bit scary or mysterious. But anyhow, they love to shoot films in this location. Okay, this is where our politicians go to work every day. Good for them. So this is the building of the parliament. What you can see inside is, of course, some assembly halls, but the coronation jewels are also held here. Now, a few words about the crown. I think every country has its own weirdness, if you can call it that. But for example, in Hungary, the highest authority is not a person, it's the crown. Technically speaking, all the land belongs to the crown. Hungarian kings had only one crown, and it's this one. It wasn't like every time there was a new king, he had a new crown made. He was not accepted as the king of Hungary unless he was crowned with this crown. It's so old, scholars keep arguing as to who made it and when. There are several theories. I'm not going to go into that, but it's a very special object. Some people think it has actually supernatural powers and all that, but I'm not going to go into that either. So that's the parliament. Opera House. I mentioned music. Hungarians are a music-loving nation, and I'm really glad I found this picture because it shows that people actually go there. It's not just a nice building, but they do go there to enjoy some nice opera. I have to confess I've never been there, as I do not like opera. But if you're ever in the neighborhood, I suggest you go and pay a visit. Okay, a church named after Matthias, who was one of our greatest kings in the 15th century. He was actually one of the greatest Renaissance kings that ever lived. At the time, he had a library which I think rivaled, but did not surpass the Library of the Vatican. But it was the second largest library in the world at the time. This church was the venue for coronations, and there's an interesting legend. This happened when the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, occupied Hungary, and there was an effort to take the city back from them. So the city was being shot at with cannons, and the Turks, they were praying inside the church, which of course by the time had been transformed into a mosque. So they are praying inside the building when a cannonball hit the walls, hit the building, and a wall collapsed, and lo and behold, there was a Madonna standing, looking down at the Turks. When they looked up and they saw this Madonna, by the way, Madonna is basically the mother of Jesus, it's the Virgin Mary. They took it as a bad omen. They got so scared, their morale collapsed, and the city fell on that very day. Fisherman's Bastion. As the name suggests, as you can see it up there, this place gets its name from the fisherman whose responsibility it was to protect that part of the town during the Middle Ages. What's interesting about this building, this structure, it has 7 towers. In the 9th century, when Hungarians arrived into this area, the Carpathian Basin area, there were 7 tribes altogether, whom we revere very, very much. And each tribe has a tower. And now that I mentioned sort of like the ancient history of Hungarians, it's also very interesting and sort of ironic and funny to note that while most of the world regards, for example, Attila the Hun, a bloodthirsty monster, in Hungary it's still a very popular boy's name that they give to little boys. And in our legends and stories, he's a great hero, Attila the Hun. By the way, the name Hungary, in almost every language, you have the UN or the HUN letters at the beginning. We don't call ourselves that. We call ourselves something different. But in every other language, they call ourselves something beginning with HUN, Hun, referring to the Huns. Now that's again a scholarly debate that still goes on today. Whether Hungarians are related to the Huns, are we straight descendants of the Huns, or was there a common ancestor and then we branched out and one group became the Huns, the other one the Hungarians? That's not really settled. Heroes Square. The 7 tribes, the leaders of the 7 tribes, at the foot of this erected monument here. All around here we have national heroes, starting from the year 1000. It's mostly military leaders, kings, people that did something great for the country, and they are all watched over by the Archangel Michael. Folk art. You can see some simple but nice examples out there as part of the exhibition. Now, folk art, even if you just look at these images or you go out there and take a look for yourself, you will notice that it's almost always the same pattern. It's flowers and chili peppers. Now, you might have the question, why always the same patterns. There's a nice story that explains this all. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a boy and a girl, and they were very much in love. Now, the devil, of course, could not stand this. He got jealous, so he kidnapped the boy and took him down to hell. The girl did not give up. She went all the way to the deepest depths of hell and told the devil, well, asked the devil to please give her love back to her. The devil thought he was going to be clever, and this is what he said. Okay, I will do what you ask of me if you bring me the most beautiful flowers of the summer. Now this was a problem because this was the middle of winter. There were no flowers at all. The girl went home and thought about this, and she came up with this solution. She took her apron and embroidered the most beautiful flowers that you can see in the summer on her apron, went back to hell, showed it to the devil, who had no choice but to release the boy, and they lived happily ever after. That's the story. Now, folk art, this type of folk art is actually used to be really, really popular before the age of television and internet and Facebook, when women had nothing much to do, especially in the winter, at night. So they would do this, embroider, and they would put these patterns on everything. Pillowcases, bed sheets, tablecloths, clothes. As you can see, they're quite popular with Hollywood actresses. That's Harry Potter's best friend. That's Nicole Kidman. They even put these patterns on Formula 1 race car drivers' overalls.